The leaders just need to be aware that it's their responsibility to make sure all their team is engaged and working properly, and if there is an issue with one, to take them aside and talk to them. Well, I basically see leadership as having three main aspects to it. One is the vision. I don't think that's really negotiable. You really need to have a strong vision, and to develop that, to keep on working on it all the time and setting strategies according to that vision. I don't really see tasks managing. Well, if you're talking about senior leadership, they're going to be looking at systems and processes, and from those the tasks will develop. It's not really negotiable. It's not the most fun thing to do, but they have to set the systems and processes in place to get everything really ticking properly and filtering down into senior management and to moving from that. But the third aspect to leadership is about what is now being called servant leadership. It's about knowing how to bring out the best potential of their people. So, I call that 360-degree leadership, that you've got the visionary aspect, you've got the people aspect, the human-centered part, and you've got the systems and processes. I don't think you need to shift one from the other. It's about balancing everything together. I think without having all three main aspects to leadership, you're always going to be struggling somewhere. You're either going to be leaving your people behind, and you're going to get really upset because no one is performing properly, or you're going to be maybe too soft a leader that's not going to be, maybe it's going to have a problem holding your people in place, or you're not going to be having a strong direction. So having the three together creates a really very good balance for everybody. Well, when you see a lot of your people are spending half their day looking for other jobs, that's a surefire sign. There are three main signs, really. I mean, they're kind of regarded. One is absenteeism, when people just don't turn up to work. The other one is presenteeism, when people turn up to work, but they're not really being productive. And the third aspect is when you have very low retention rate. Now, with absenteeism, if you're seeing a lot of that, that could indicate people feeling isolated at work. That can happen very easily. Managers need to be really aware of this, that to give everybody equal attention. What happens is, and as a coach, I've had people come to me saying, my boss hates me. And the boss may not even be aware of that. That they're passing them over to put into groups or teams. And when that person starts to feel that way, and they instinctively turn to their colleagues. And their colleagues, rather than supporting them, which is what you would think would happen, actually they're worried about a contagion effect. So they tend to distance. And what happens is that people end up waking up in the morning, they feel they feel it's a very hostile environment they're stepping into. It gets to that point. They don't turn up to work. That's when you have absenteeism. They spend a large part of the day looking for other jobs. And it's actually a very easy problem to fix. The leaders just need to be aware that it's their responsibility to make sure all their team is engaged and working properly, and if there is an issue with one, to take them aside and talk to them. So that's really with absenteeism, presenteeism, and lack of productivity. Sorry, just to say, isolation in the workplace in the US costs them $54 billion a year. Poor productivity in the UK costs around £51 billion a year. In the US, there was a study by McKinsey done not long ago. It showed around 200, it's hard to quantify exactly, but they reckon it's around $200 billion a year in loss of people who are not turning up to work, who are not being productive, it's a massive loss of not only productivity and input into the workplace, but in terms of human capital, that people are really suffering. Nobody wants to go to work just to slouch around. Very, very few people want that. Most people want to be really excited about their work, and it's up to the managers to really make sure that people are being utilized, that their human resources are. It's the biggest expenditure for most industries. So they really, it's not hard to do that. It's easy to put in, with a little bit of well-being. Again, there was a study last year done by Deloitte. They showed that for every £1 spent in investing in their people's well-being, they got back £4.7, right? And for every pound they invested in changing the organizational culture, they yielded back 6.3% return. So, sorry, 6.3 pounds for every pound spent. So the investment, the return to the investment is massive, and it's very surprising that more and more organizations are not really paying attention to this. Well, this is it's actually is a very interesting question, because if you think about how much of your interaction happens just through being in an office, just chatting, overhearing people talking, discussing problems, knocking on your boss's door and say, "Can I have 10 minutes of your time?" You don't have any of that when you're really. It's much harder to have the more natural interactions that we have. So one challenge, I think, one of the biggest challenges in remote working is everything is being recorded. And if you're asking for help in a certain thing, there's always at the back of your mind, it's going to be there forever, and it doesn't make me look like I'm not doing my job properly if I'm asking too many questions and saying I have challenges. So that's one of the first things, I think, in remote working, is to really establish the groundwork of a growth mindset, that you don't fail, you fail forward. That maybe also there's something to be said that if you don't have enough challenges, then are you stretching yourself enough? So just to establish from the outset that it's okay to ask questions, because you don't have that natural way of working where a lot of the questions will be answered without you're even needing maybe to ask. So that's one of the main things. And to have very regular meetings, one-on-one, and in the group meetings to discuss all the challenges together, because everybody learns from these experiences. A lot of people have similar challenges, so to discuss these also in the group meetings, and to also give them support for any professional development that they need, as well as what I just said earlier about the well-being factors. That also needs to be really supported and to be considered. And of course, the normal things of trying to have at least biannual meetings. Some companies, some organizations have them much more often, like every 2 months. When I when I run my programs online, and I have people who are like from Hong Kong and Mongolia and Europe and Canada, US, they're from all over the place. One thing I always do is, and I found that works really, really well. We have something called the higher self, which is basically, if I say to you, do you feel there's a part of yourself that is wiser and more compassionate than your day-to-day waking self? So if you think of that as your higher self, that wisest, most loving, most beautiful part of who you are, that's in body. So I always do a 5-minute meditation with them to connect themselves to their higher selves, but then to connect them all to each other. And I've had amazing success with that. And it's just a 5-minute meditation, but they always end up pretty supportive with each other. When they've asked questions, I've just stepped back. I've let them just, answer each other's questions, and the interaction becomes really, it's very, very bonding, and so much so that they've kind of organized themselves to try and meet up in London, where I'm based. So to all, they've really wanted to meet up, and it creates very, very good energy between them, and it really builds trust as well. So that's something I always would recommend if people are open to that, to do this kind of meditation, because it does really work at a much higher level, and it's very, very connecting. Well, so it's a state of awareness. It's really the Genius Zone. In the last 5 to 10 years, coaches have been calling it the Genius Zone, but it's actually called the superconscious. It's the superconscious mind, or the higher mind, which is being written up about for millennia. And the term superconscious was coined by Samuel Taylor Coleridge in the 1820s. He was a philosopher in Cambridge who coined that. But it's a level of awareness that allows us to access a massive wellspring of information and knowledge, wisdom, and creativity. And actually, Brian Tracy, who is one of the leadership gurus, he calls it a CPU in the sky. And we all have a connection to that. It's inbuilt into us. And the chances are almost everybody, I'm sure you have, and almost everybody listening would have experienced a time when you've been so inspired and loved what you're doing so much that time just whizzes by. You're not really thinking about, you forget to want to eat or nibble, and you look up and you think, like half an hour's gone, and it's actually been 2-3 hours. So chances are that you're connected then to that very creative zone, that genius zone. And for me, I see each one of us like a prism, and each one of us has our unique prism, just like every snowflake is different. And that when this light comes through our mind, it gets refracted through this prism, and what it throws out depends on you. So for instance, with Einstein, it would have been his genius. With Mozart, it would have been music. With Einstein, it's been mathematics and physics. With Mozart, it's music. With somebody who's maybe a photographer, might come out in their artistic work, a painter, an author, whatever you are, and you do, and you love doing, you're going to really express it that way. And the reason why people like me are always banging on about passion is because when you're really not, a lot of people tell me I don't know what my passion is. I say, don't worry too much about that. But what really gets you engaged? What gets you motivated to want to work and find out a lot more about it? So when you're in that state of focused, that's when you start connecting to it. But it also happens through meditation, of course. It happens a lot through something called conscious questioning. Like, for instance, like at one point, this is when I kind of left banking to move into the spiritual kind of area and practices. One of the things that came up for me is I had a problem, and my heart was like there, and my head was there, and they were going totally diametrically opposed to each other. And I was like, well, what's going on here? There's only one of me. Am I my mind? Am I my head? What is this? And I realized then that actually I needed to align. And then align to what? So of course, the answers started coming, that is aligning to the higher self, to my highest values. If you're going to align to anything and you're going to make that effort, do it to make it meaningful, So that is conscious questioning, is when you start seeing things that don't really make sense, that seem paradoxical, but shouldn't be. And you can start really exploring more and more, and the more you dig, you actually come up with really amazing answers. And the other way that I would say people can connect to it, which is also the way I kind of really came into it, is I kept getting guided to go to energy healing. And I was like, nah, I'm a mathematician, I don't do that. But then I thought, oh God, I hate myself. It's so close-minded, I'm open-minded, I will go. So I eventually did go. And I came out of the third session. So it's literally, I started healing in January 93. Third week, I had 2 people on the course with me who also started at the same time, independently tell me that one of my chakras was out of place. Now, I had actually started seeing my chakras like a year or two before that. And I didn't even know, this was long before the internet, so I didn't even know what these things were. A friend of mine told me and gave me a book to read, and I forgot all about them. But one chakra was actually really out of place. And I just was like, never mind, nothing in nature is straight, and it didn't really matter. It didn't have anything to do with my life, so I just ignored it. But two people who just started doing energy healing independently picked it up, and it's something I myself witnessed. So I came out thinking, oh, wow, this is so cool, that you've got, we knew even back then that we use very small part of our cognitive processes. It's like 5 to 8% of our brain. I was thinking, wow, this is some of the rest. And I was also aware that I was using and healing the same part of my brain when I'd been really creative and I've done good work. So I started really researching it a lot, and as life would have it, I went to my parents' house, opened up a Newsweek, and there was an article on the supraconscious mind. So I didn't even know what it was called, but I realized I kind of at least had a terminology for it to go and explore it after that. And it's an amazing facility that we all have access to, that we all use, and it helps you to access more of your potential. So for me, it's like really, really cool. It's everybody's already using it, but we can make a lot more use of it, and if we bring more awareness to it. So it's a very good thing to be aware of. And like as you said, a lot of coaches these days call it your genius because of that. I think it really comes back to this potential again, that we have so much more potential than we can ever really know, and we spend so much of our day, especially now that we've had, with the internet and with emails kind of coming in thick and fast, and with the AI, with the boost, and it's going to get more, when quantum computing comes in, it's going to get more and more. So we spend so much of our day just fielding problems, worrying about all the emails we have to send, thinking about, oh God, I have to deal with this, that person spoke, do they hate me? And, relationships, and, there's so many, it can occupy all our volume. So all we're actually focusing on is our problems and fielding them. And that's incredibly draining. Of course, we have to field our problems. Of course, we have to respond to emails. But let's create more space. Because this is one thing about spiritual intelligence, is that, I always come back to thinking about this, the Oscar Wilde quote, we're all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. And this is absolutely the case. If all we do is look at the gutter, we're going to really wreck our lives. But we all have to be in the gutter. We all deal with problems on a day-to-day basis. But let's make space to look at the stars and see what our potential is. And we'll be amazed at what we can do, what we can accomplish. And I've been preparing recently. I've been doing a lot of research for a talk I'm giving at a tech exhibition on where quantum physics meets consciousness and how it impacts our evolution. And it's actually really amazing how our science is now bringing us back to everything that the mystics have always said, that our intentions shape our reality, our thoughts, our intentions shape our reality. And quantum physics is really kind of coming in back to that. So if we're always focusing on our problems, what are we going to get? And let's deal with our problems, but focus on what brings us light and hope into our lives, and really aim to accomplish that. And I'm a very practical person, so I actually like to give very practical things to do, very simple exercises for that, practical tools to help people feel more confident and to help them live a richer life, and to bring that also. And then when you bring that into an organization, an amazing synergy happens when you have more and more people who are in that state. A synergy happens. and people are much more excited to coming back into work. And that's when you really start creating ripple effects within the organization and fielding out as well. That's what I really hope people would take from the talks.